Hey everybody. So I know there's a lot of students who watch my videos. In fact, one of my most popular videos still is how to become a straight A student. So I figured I'd give you some more tips for the school year on how to become a consistent straight A student, even if you are currently a C or D student or B student, and without having to kill yourself and just work yourself to death. So I have some tips for you, and this is the new modern version for 2021. So I hate a long intro when I watch videos, so let's just get into these tips. Number one, you have to treat school, the rules, the system, as something that you can master. I think people have this false belief that this is just how it is. I'm not good at school, there's not much I can do better. However, the amount of effort, the strategy that you put into school makes a difference of night and day. Let me explain. There was a time where I used to think, this is just how it is. These people are just so good. They always get straight A's. And I was sometimes, there's this one girl, I think her name was Aisha, and she would always get straight A's, the highest score on these tests in science. And I was always in the back of my head like, oh, screw that girl. She probably doesn't study and she's just really good at it. And I always get mediocre grades. And it was around that time that I started to get a little bit more serious about science tests. And I made a few tweaks here and there. And I remember, you know, the teacher was announcing the scores once again, and he would hand out the papers, and he'd always do this with this like grandiose manner and say, okay, this time this person scored the highest grade. And everyone in class groaned, oh, it's Aisha again. And I thought that as well. Turns out it was me. I was flabbergasted, um, shocked beyond belief because that wasn't me. And sure enough, I think one or other two people were like, oh, of course he got it too. But little did they know, I was just like them. So how did this occur? Well, first off, it's the strategy and tactics. It's not just this thing where you can't change it. You have to start with this belief that you can hack the system. You can do better. So how exactly do you do that? Well, first off, this brings us to tip number two. How do you tackle and approach the time that you spend at home after you get out of class? In class, you're doing your thing, you're forced to be there, but after class, you have what? Until the moment you go to bed. Sometimes that's 6 hours, sometimes that's 5 hours, sometimes more, less, of free time. And, most kids just spend it goofing off as much as possible or a moderate degree. And, if they remember, they'll do the homework and so forth. But I started to get a little bit more systematic about it. I said, you know what? Instead of just kind of like cramming 10 minutes before the test or something like that, let's figure out what I can study, and I'll dedicate some time um, afterwards. Maybe it's just 10-15 minutes after school that day, but I dedicate time. Okay, this is what he's probably going to test me on, and he said it's going to be this chapter, so I gotta figure out, okay, here's the section that he's probably going to test it. I mean, it's bolded. These are the 5 types of uh, copper or whatever physics principles, and I would just review that. And sure enough, those small things help. That brings me to point number two, which is that repetition beats one long duration. There's been a lot of studies on this in terms of memory, and the experiments have found that you memorize things much better if you do them um, multiple times every week, even if it's for a much shorter amount of time, rather than one long cram session. So rather than spending even 3 hours the night before trying to cram and remember stuff, if you were to have spent just 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day for the last 2 weeks before that test, just refreshing your memory when you got home on the concepts that you were tested on, that repetition is much better for building the neurons in your brain to remember something. So think about it. You end up spending less time, and in certain ways it is less stressful because you're just spending a casual 5-10 minutes while eating an apple or doing something relaxed, and you get more results. So think about that. I used to have this huge bias for, oh, I'm the hero. I spent 4 hours the night before studying. Well, it turns out, I could spend a lot less time, but just do it more frequently. And even if you sum that all up, it's sometimes still less than the time I spent cramming the night before. So I think you get the point there. The next tip has to do with baby steps. The same thing applies to how I developed a very consistent exercise routine, but most people burn themselves out because they don't know how to exercise properly. And what I mean by this is they will just go into the gym, and I used to do this, and they'll do 2 hours or 4 hours there because that day they're feeling macho, they're feeling badass, and then they don't go again for 2 weeks because they just, in their mind, they just burnt themselves out. Each time they think about going to the gym, they think about that last 3 hour session. And that was me. I switched my approach, and actually Matt Frazier, the CrossFit champion, actually just did a podcast on this exact topic for the podcast called Iconic, if you want a more credible source. But instead, I recommend small bits and then gradually building from there. Start by just going home and studying for 10 minutes. And then once you've built that into a habit, then increase it to 15 minutes or 13 minutes. And then for the next week, it's 15. And then next week after that, it's 20 minutes a week or 20 minutes a day. And over time, it'll start building into a habit rather than cramming all night. Honestly, I think I just want to wrap up this video by saying that the theme of these tips really has to do with preparation. The people that you see, especially when you get to the higher levels, the people that you see who do well and get A's in class, on tests and homework, it's all because of the work that they do outside of school. While others watch TV, go on the computer, play video games, they spend some of their time, not all of it, some of them still have fun and play video games and watch TV, but they spend some of that time diligently studying, preparing, reviewing their notes, finishing all their homework, and making sure they don't miss a thing so that they don't get any points docked when they have to turn in that homework or take that test. Those tests and quizzes are coming. There's a certain pattern. The teachers will usually tell you, there's a pop quiz every Monday, or, there's a test every quarter. Those things, you have some idea about them, and they prepare for them ahead of time. And just with a little bit of preparation, it goes a long way. And guess what? After they've done that, they still have half the night, to have fun. So they're really sometimes not missing out on as much as you think. Hopefully you like these tips, and hopefully this is a community. So what that means is share your tips. If you've seen some astronomical success in yourself or others, what have you seen that's worked and what hasn't? Share with the community, and let's help us all. Thanks, and I'll see you later.